Welcome everyone to War Thunder Histories, episode 15, and today we're looking at probably the most outdated aircraft to serve through the entirety of World War II, the mighty Fairey Swordfish. As always, we'll discuss its design and development, decorated service history, notable combat action, and of course, how it plays in game. I hope you enjoy. In 1933, Fairey, already with a successful track record in aircraft design, began development of a new three-seat naval aircraft with both a reconnaissance and torpedo bombing capability. The proposed design adopted a biplane configuration to be powered by a single 645 horsepower Bristol Pegasus 2M radial engine. Although in the 1930s biplanes were not uncommon, they were quickly becoming outdated. Initially, Fairey designated the design TSR-1, which was short for Torpedo Spotter Reconnaissance 1. Initially, Fairey followed the design as a privately funded venture while customers and applicable requirements were sought. Development of the TSR-1 was in parallel to Fairey's activities with the Air Ministry specification S930, with Fairey having already submitted a design designated the Fairey S930. S930 was an operational requirement issued by the Air Ministry for a spotter and reconnaissance aircraft. The TSR-1 gained significant design adaptations from Fairey's independent design work towards replacing the Fairey 3 in Greek Naval Air Service. Then on March 21, 1933, the TSR-1 prototype with the tail number F1875 conducted its maiden flight from Great West Aerodrome, Heathrow, England, piloted by Fairey test pilot Chris Staniland. The aircraft performed various flights to determine flight characteristics, also performing flights re-engined with the Armstrong Siddeley Tiger engine, eventually reverting back to the Bristol Pegasus. Fairey then informed the Air Ministry of its work towards the Greek Naval Air Service, who had begun to lose interest, also providing their solutions for the requirements for a spotter and reconnaissance aircraft. Then unfortunately, on September 11, 1933, F1875 was lost during spinning tests where the aircraft became unrecoverable. Luckily, the pilot survived. Previous to this mishap, TSR-1 had performed favourably, and so Fairey proceeded with the improved TSR-2 prototype. The TSR-2 was equipped with a more powerful Pegasus engine, along with an additional bay in the rear fuselage construction, resulting in a slightly longer fuselage. This was to counteract spin tendencies when operating at full power. The upper wing was also given a sweep back to account for the lengthened fuselage. Then in 1934, the Air Ministry issued specification S1533, which formally added the torpedo bomber role to the design specification. TSR-2, with the tail number K4190, conducted its maiden flight, again flown by Chris Staniland, on April 17, 1934. During the TSR-2 test program, K4190 was given floats in place of its conventional landing gear for water handling trials, performing its first flight in this configuration on November 10, 1934. After these successful tests, catapult and recovery tests were performed aboard HMS Repulse with more successes. Then in 1935, following even more successful testing at RAF Martlesham Heath, the Air Ministry ordered 3 pre-production aircraft, also officially giving the designation to the aircraft as Swordfish. All of the pre-production aircraft were powered by a Pegasus 3 M3 radial engine with a 3-bladed Fairey Reed propeller. Then on December 31, 1935, K5660, the first pre-production Swordfish, made its maiden flight, with K5661 being the first Swordfish to be delivered on February 19th of 1936, and then the final pre-production Swordfish, K5662, equipped with floats. Fairey initially received an order of 68 aircraft designated as Swordfish 1 in early 1936, entering service with the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm in July of 1936. The Swordfish had a relatively crude construction, a metal frame covered by a fabric skin, earning its nickname String Bag by its crews. The aircraft featured a folding wing for better stowage aboard aircraft carriers with an open cockpit design. It is worth mentioning at this point, although the Swordfish had just entered service, and although it wasn't uncommon to see biplanes in the early 1930s, by the mid to late 1930s biplanes were definitely obsolete. And on top of this, Fairey had already begun work on replacing the Swordfish. Initially, the Swordfish 1 was able to carry a single torpedo or up to 1,500 pounds of bombs or mines. The aircraft was also armed with a single Vickers 7.7 machine gun on the right-hand side of the nose, and a single Vickers or Lewis 7.7 machine gun for the gunner in the rear cockpit. The Swordfish had a crew of 3, with a pilot, observer, and gunner sat behind one another. Later variants of Swordfish would be able to carry up to 8 RP-3 rockets and different variations of radar to search for naval targets. Initially, Fairey was the sole producer of Swordfish, but in 1940 the Air Ministry approached Blackburn Aircraft to make up for production since Fairey was becoming more involved with newer aircraft development, and by the end of the war was the primary producer of Swordfish. By the outbreak of war in September of 1939, there were 13 operational Swordfish squadrons in service, although by 1939 the Swordfish was already outdated like I'd mentioned before. However, this didn't prevent the Swordfish from serving throughout the entirety of World War II. Eventually, by the end of 1939, there were 26 Fleet Air Arm squadrons along with 20 second-line squadrons for training and pilot tuition roles. During the opening months of the war, the Swordfish spent the vast majority of its time on convoy escort missions which were mostly uneventful. with the first combat use of the Swordfish coming during the Norwegian campaign on April 11, 1940, where several Swordfish were launched from HMS Furious to attack German vessels reported at Trondheim. Upon their arrival, only 2 destroyers were sighted, with the ensuing engagement only 1 hit was recorded. The attack was recognised as the first attack by torpedo-carrying aircraft of World War II. Then 2 days later, on the 13th, a Swordfish launched from the battleship HMS Warspite was used to spot shells from Royal Navy ships with great effect, this resulting in the sinking of 9 German warships with no Royal Navy losses. The same Swordfish also spotted the U-boat U-64, engaging and sinking it. This attack has been recognised as the first U-boat kill by Fleet Air Arm aircraft during World War II. Following the Italian declaration of war, 9 Swordfish from 767 Naval Air Squadron conducted the first Allied bombing raid on Italian soil on the 14th of June 1940 after launching from their base in France. On July 30th, 1940, 12 Swordfish from 810 and 820 Naval Air Squadrons launched from HMS Ark Royal and conducted 3 sorties in the controversial raid upon the French fleet anchored at Mers al-Kabir. Still controversial to this day, this was to prevent the French fleet from falling into German hands. The Swordfish were able to cripple the French battleship Dunkirk, along with significant damage to other vessels. This was considered the first ever victory for the Royal Navy without the use of naval gunfire. Then on August 22nd, 3 Swordfish armed with a single torpedo each were able to collectively sink 2 U-boats, a destroyer and a replenishment ship. 4 kills with 3 torpedoes is very, very lucky, which is why I decided to include that fact. One of the most impressive achievements by Swordfish was at the Battle of Taranto, when Swordfish from HMS Illustrious were able to cripple the Italian fleet in port, sinking or critically damaging a number of ships, which included 3 battleships, 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers. The Swordfish was praised for its manoeuvrability, being able to avoid barrage balloons and anti-aircraft fire with ease. And on top of this, Swordfish on this operation were mostly armed with bombs due to the limited avenues for torpedo attacks. Another significant operation for Swordfish was during the pursuit of the German battleship Bismarck, where Swordfish from HMS Ark Royal scored 2 torpedo hits with 1 jamming Bismarck's rudder, meaning that she could not escape the pursuing Royal Navy fleet. Amazingly, the Swordfish's slow speed was credited for their success, as German gun directors aboard Bismarck were unable to account for the slow speed, causing shells to explode well ahead of the aircraft, greatly limiting their effect. As more modern naval aircraft began to enter service with the Fleet Air Arm, the Swordfish transitioned from a torpedo bombing role to a submarine hunting role. The Swordfish pioneered the use of radar to search for naval vessels, using this to guide destroyers to U-boats during convoy escort missions later in the war. Swordfish also achieved the first recorded rocket kill of a U-boat when a Swordfish 2 spotted and attacked one. I can't seem to find where it was, but only that it happened, so sorry about that. Also, I have read, and it's quite a shady source, so I'm not sure how true it is, but apparently a Swordfish was the first aircraft to score a nighttime kill on a U-boat using radar, so there's that as well. Unfortunately, Swordfish production finally ended in 1944 with a total of 2,391 aircraft produced, costing around £5,500 in 1936, which equates to around £400,000 in today's money. By the end of the war, in 1945, there were still 9 frontline squadrons equipped with Swordfish, primarily equipped for hunting midget submarines. Then in 1946, the last training squadron equipped with Swordfish was disbanded, with a small number of aircraft remaining in service for sundry duties at some naval air stations. I think it's very interesting that although the Swordfish entered service completely outdated, it managed to serve through the entirety of World War II and outlived all of the aircraft that were designed to replace it. During the war, there were 4 main variants of Swordfish, easily named 1, 2, 3, and 4, and to break it down simply, the Swordfish 1 is the base model with the ability to carry bombs or torpedoes, the Swordfish 2 allowed for mounting up to 8 RP-3 rockets with some surface-searching radar, the Swordfish 3 mounted a more powerful radar to search for subsurface targets which no longer allowed for carrying torpedoes, and then the Swordfish 4, which was specially built for the Royal Canadian Air Force with an enclosed cockpit. The 2 primary operators of Swordfish was the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm and the Royal Air Force, with Canada also operating an unspecified number of Swordfish. Australia operated only 6 Swordfish, along with both Spain and Italy operating handfuls of captured Swordfish in various states of repair. If you'd like to see one of these magnificent aircrafts in flight, Navy Wings here in the UK maintains and flies a Swordfish which performs at Yeovilton Air Days every year at Royal Naval Air Station, Yeovilton. There are also a number of locations internationally as static displays such as the Canada Aviation and Space Museum in Canada and the American Air Power Heritage Museum in Dallas, Texas. So how does the Swordfish 1 specifically perform in game? For simplicity, I will be focusing on the Swordfish 1 because the Swordfish 2 was a random event vehicle that not that many people have. The Swordfish 1 is a British Rank 1 battle rating 1.0 naval torpedo bomber. As previously mentioned, it's crewed by 3, a pilot, observer and gunner. The aircraft has a top speed of only 140 miles per hour at 4,592 feet with a maximum altitude of 10,824 feet. Requiring around 974 feet of runway and able to make a full 360-degree turn in only 13 seconds. Obviously it's dependent on fuel and bomb loads. The aircraft is armed with two Vickers 7.7 machine guns, with one on the right hand side of the nose and one for the tail gunner, able to carry any of the following: 4 250-pound bombs, 6 250-pound bombs, 2 500-pound bombs with 2 250-pound bombs, or 1 torpedo. At 1.0, the Swordfish does its intended role as intended. It can effectively sink ships. Although it does carry bombs, it's not massively effective for ground attacking in tank games, as it does get shot down immediately, but I have seen people go into top tier games with Swordfish and they have killed main battle tanks, which is just crazy to me, but if you really want to get them memes, then you can do that. As one of the slowest aircraft in the game, it doesn't have any capability to outrun anything. It is very maneuverable though, so you can pretty much outturn anything. However, with a single 7.7 machine gun in the nose and a single 7.7 machine gun as your tail gunner, you don't really have very much defensive or offensive capability in that regard, so try and avoid aircraft where possible. But when you're engaged, just use your maneuverability to your advantage and just try and pray for help, basically. Like all bombers, I recommend you fly this aircraft with cover where possible, or equally with other Swordfish. The Swordfish also works well in low-tier naval battles, but due to the AI gunners being bloody aimbots, you'll die pretty much every time you try and attack a ship. But against AI ships in ARB games, you should be relatively okay, as they're a lot less accurate. Obviously, the Swordfish is limited to only carrying one torpedo, so it's always good to fly with a wingman or two, like I've said before, as it just increases your chances of being able to sink a ship. Overall, the Swordfish is a very, very fun and easy aircraft to fly and land, as it's very, very slow and very, very controllable. As I say, its massive disadvantage is just that it doesn't have the offensive or defensive capability. Even in large numbers, the Swordfish is still very limited, so it's always worth just bearing that in mind. Thank you all very much for watching. If there's a vehicle or battle you'd like to see in the series, please let me know in the comment section below. A special thanks to Sparky and Bowery Jupiter 54 for helping me get this footage together. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's video, please leave me a like, and if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. For those of you that don't know, I do now have a Discord server, which I will leave a link for in the description down below. Thank you all again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.